Welcome to the Ebb and Glow podcast. I'm your host, Jenelle Tremblett, and I'm a firm believer that even when life doesn't go as planned, it is taking you exactly where you're meant to be. On this podcast, I'm here to help you finally release control of what you think you want and begin to just trust in the ebbs and flows of life. Each week, I will show you how to build that positive mindset, radiate with self-confidence, and cultivate an unshakable resilience. Let me prove to you that even when life ebbs, you will glow. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Ebb and Glow podcast. This episode is a solo episode with yours truly, and today I'm going to talk about all the times I've quit jobs and how almost 2 years ago, I recently changed careers completely. And I get a lot of questions from my own friends about this and people I talk to, even like my clients. I've had many friends ask me multiple times, like, where did you get the courage to quit your job? Where did you get the courage to move so many provinces, which is a separate episode, but also kind of the same reasons why and answers why. But a lot of the times people ask me, like, what did you do to prepare for quitting a job? Did you quit before you even had another job? And the answer is yes, I've done that many times. And I also get a lot of questions from my real estate clients when they realize that I haven't been doing real estate my entire career. And when they learn that I actually come from a marketing and sales background, more so in the corporate and startup worlds. And they are always curious, like, oh, why did you change careers? And I realize when I'm answering, people find people who change careers really fascinating, and they almost admire the bravery and the courage and the confidence to be able to make those changes. And for me, it's always been second nature to if I don't like a job, I leave. If I don't like a relationship, I leave. If I don't like a city that I'm living in, I leave. So for me, it just always felt second nature, as I said. And it wasn't until I kept realizing I kept getting this question that I'm thinking, wow, maybe I should reflect back a little bit and think, why do I do this, and how do I do this, and what's my methodology, and what's my thought process, and how do I take these types of risk, and how do I assess the risk when I make these changes? And so after thinking about that a lot, it led me to realize that, okay, let's do a quick solo episode on this and provide some context around all the times I've quit jobs and even in the last couple of years, me changing careers. If you haven't already, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, you can follow and subscribe so that you get every single episode, download it right away, and then you can listen to them weekly or on your own time. If you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, subscribe as well so that you, again, same thing, get every episode that comes out. If you are loving today's episode, make sure to share it with a friend or even just let me know you're listening. I always want to know if these messages and these stories are resonating with you and if they're making you just feel less alone and less maybe weird. There's nothing better than when you share your stories with someone else or share your experiences. It makes someone feel, oh, okay, that's not just me. It's not just me feeling that way. I'm not the only one in the world going through that. And I mean, ultimately, that's what this podcast is all about. When I think back to all of my job changes and even just all of the jobs I've done when did I start really working? Maybe at 14 or 15. So yeah, I've been working for near 15 years. So when I think back, a story that comes to mind immediately, this memory came up when I think I was home last year and I was pulling out my high school yearbooks and reading through them. And when it came across my name, it was like the way they had it set up is they had like our name and whatever, I don't know, basically what you do in yearbook stuff. Basically, you put a quote, you put like your dream job. And there was a funny section for everyone that said like most likely to, or basically what's inevitable kind of thing. And for some reason, mine said, it basically said bound to be unemployed. I read that and I thought, why did I put that there? Like, what was happening when we were creating the yearbook that I thought that the end result was going to be me unemployed? And I remember back that I don't know if I was always a lifeguard and a swimming instructor. And I don't know if I was like looking for another job at that time. Yeah, it's bringing a memory back, or maybe I just wanted to try something different, and I was doing maybe the hours weren't there that I wanted, or maybe I just like wanted to work during the weekdays instead of the weekends. Because I remember being a lifeguard and a swimming instructor, and I worked like weekends all the time. So maybe, and I could be making this up, maybe I thinking back in high school, maybe I wanted my weekends back, and maybe I wanted more weekdays. Or knowing me, I probably was just a bit of a hustler and maybe just wanted another job because I wanted more money. I mean, that sounds very plausible as well. But anyways, when I think back, I think it must have been like grade or 11 or 12. And back then, you could either be a lifeguard, which a lot of us were. We worked at our local YMCA, or a lot of people worked at McDonald's. And it's funny, I believe the people at McDonald's actually got paid more than us as lifeguards, which to this day actually blows my mind, but that's besides the point. But anyways, I remember like going around my town and think like I'm not 25, 26 at this time. Like I'm 15, 16 years old. I remember going around my town applying at like all the retail stores, and I don't know, maybe I did like some kind of front desk applications, but I remember applying to like Dollarama and like all of these random stores, and no one would hire me. And I don't know why. I was a straight A student involved in absolutely every extracurricular. I already had a job as a lifeguard. And I remember thinking back, thinking, wait, why isn't anyone hiring me? And still to this day, I don't know why. I don't know if they thought like was maybe too overqualified, or maybe they were looking for someone that was maybe more full time. But anyways, I ended up getting a job at, basically it's the equivalent of Dollarama, and it's just a different name of it. Anyways, I don't know why I worked there, but I had a lot of fun there, and I actually really enjoyed that job. And it was one of my first experiences in retail, and I really enjoyed it. And keep in mind, I'm from a town where it's like we don't really have a lot of clothing stores. If I was from a bigger city, I would have just like worked at like Hollister, Abercrombie, or something when I was younger, but we didn't have any of those stores. So our equivalent was like, yeah, like Dollarama or Walmart or things like that. So moral of the story is I remember thinking back and wondering why the hell is no one hiring me. So I think it might have just been a running joke in my friend group that like, how funny is it that Jenelle is like one of the top people in our class and like no one in this town will hire her. Anyways, that's that story. But another story that really comes to mind when I think about my career and how I've always kind of been a little bit unapologetic in terms of what I wanted and what I didn't want. And I was never afraid to be vocal of what felt misaligned. Now, that being said, I almost wish I was a little bit more vocal. I mean, if I was, and if I sat down and thought to myself, okay, what career is best for me, then I probably would have landed where I am today or somewhere similar a lot earlier. However, I wouldn't be as good at my current career if it wasn't for all of those experiences before. So I'm extremely grateful for them. But when I think back, like I think I've told this story on one of the episodes before, but I remember doing my commerce degree, and I remember applying for co-ops, and in co-ops, like we were doing our internships. We had to do 3 co-ops for a 4-year degree. And I remember applying for the internships, and every job description I ever looked at just really didn't resonate. And I felt like I was going through the motions, and I knew I had to do these 4-month co-op terms to be able to get my degree. So, I mean, that didn't bother me, but I remember just doing these jobs as a means to an end. I didn't really ever know, like, any kind of job I would come across, just like, again, never resonated with me, never excited me. And when I think back and when I reflect and when I think about it today, it ultimately is because I wasn't meant to kind of be working in that corporate world. And even though I needed those jobs to be able to finish my degree, and obviously I needed those jobs to be able to pay rent and pay tuition and live, and that being said, I enjoyed the jobs while I was doing them. But when I think back there, they really weren't really in alignment for me. And it was just a job. And I mean, that's fine. I guess you're 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. It's fine if a job is just a job. We don't need to be doing the job that lights us up completely, especially as we're figuring it out. But it's funny thinking back that I almost wish I had some people in my life that showed me there was a different way. For instance, taught me that there was an option to be a real estate agent. I remember early on in my university degree and even late high school, I always kind of had the idea of being a photographer in the back of my head. And I wish I had some people in my life that kind of nudged me along and said, yeah, like that's possible. You can do that. And I believe that that's so nice, the power of social media today and people in their teens and early 20s growing up, that they can see other people doing these career paths. They can see people starting YouTube channels and being entrepreneurs and being coaches and being creative entrepreneurs. And they see that it's a possibility for them. But back then, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, it was really like we were just getting Instagram. And that makes me sound so crazy old, but it all just came around the last 10 years. YouTube was fairly new. So anyone that was blogging or doing YouTube or kind of starting their own businesses at a young age, it was kind of out of the norm. And I know I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. So going outside the norm wasn't, not that it was frowned upon, but it wasn't a clear option. The clear option was go to university, get a degree, do a 9 to 5 job, and follow in that path. And although I learned a lot, and a lot of the skills I have today is because of that, I always knew it wasn't aligned. And I always think back to the jobs that I loved the most. And I really enjoyed my university retail job. I had a lot of fun doing that. And thinking back, I mean, a lot of the things I do in my career in real estate today is similar to that role. So I'm not surprised. Yeah, I've just been doing a lot of reflecting over the past couple of years just on how that career path works. And there's a lot of instances that come to mind where I was so close to going off the beaten path. And there was some, maybe just a voice in the back of my head that said, no, 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 no. Go the safe route, go the safe route. There's too much unknown off the beaten path. You don't want to go that way. And I think back, and my only regret is me listening to the voice in the back of my head that kind of was a little scared, like had a little ego to it, where it was afraid to go a different route. But I mean, hindsight's 2020, of course. But I want to get into just having the courage to quit jobs and leave and make moves. And mind you, like I've never moved countries, but I have lived in 5 provinces so far. So grew up in Newfoundland, went to school in Halifax. Then I lived in Montreal for a quick little bit after graduation. Then I went to New Brunswick for my first job. And then I moved to Toronto kind of on a whim. And that's kind of the story that I want to chat about the most on this episode, is the moment that made me decide to move to Toronto. And a lot of the people in my life know this already, but so I've lived in Toronto for almost 6 years now. So I moved to Toronto in 2016. Prior to that, I was living in New Brunswick, working in a job right out of university, and it was a great job. It paid well. I was making pretty good money at 22 years old and on a fast track to management and senior management. Like the tools and the resources were there and ready for me to grab onto them. However, it just never felt right. I remember after every day after work, I just felt like I was in this cycle of going to work, going to a workout class, coming home, making dinner, watching a show, going to bed, wake up the next day and repeat. And then comes Friday and I would do the same thing. I would go to the same bar, go to the same bar on Saturday, meal prep on Sunday, and the whole cycle would start again. Now, let me explain that if that is your life and you enjoy that, that's fantastic. I'm happy for you. However, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that schedule or that life. The only thing wrong about it for me was I was really unhappy, extremely unhappy. And I didn't at the time, like while going through it for the first year, didn't really know a way out and didn't really understand that there were any other options. And I mean, I wish I knew other options because I probably wouldn't have made impulsive decisions as I did in the moment when I did it 6 years ago. I probably would have created a better plan, but that's okay. I wouldn't be who I am today if I had a very clear plan. So that's fine. But I remember being in that job and being in that environment and just knowing whatever this is, This cannot be it. This is going to be really sad to say, and I don't want to shock anyone when I say this, but it did almost get to this point. It was getting close to this point if I didn't make any changes. I thought to myself, if this is it, I don't want it. I don't want to be here anymore. If this is it, I'm out. Like I'm out, not out moving to another province, not out moving to another job, out. Like if this is life, I don't want it. And anyone listening to this right now, if you've been there, I'm sorry. My situation didn't get as dark as it could have been because I was still relatively in a good headspace that I recognize, okay, this is bad. We have to do something about it. But I was not in a good place at all. Like mentally, meaning mentally, emotionally to some extent too, but mentally, I just felt very trapped. And I mean, we went through 2 years of a pandemic. Like we all know the feeling of feeling trapped and having our lives feeling like we don't have control over it anymore. I get it. Like I truly get it. But especially in that moment is when I got it the most. I felt like I had no control over my life and I just had to go through these emotions for the rest of my life. And I knew in that moment and in those many moments, that was absolutely not for me. So a few of the steps that I took, I knew I wanted to move. I knew I was kind of done with the East Coast. I mean, I lived there growing up. I lived there for university, and now I lived in another province kind of after university. The East Coast was complete for me. I felt like I put my time in. And I went to a university where a lot of people from Toronto went to. So I had a lot of friends that were from Toronto, and a lot of people moved back to Toronto. And I just knew at the time I was 23, I was single, and I just knew like wherever I'm going to go, really the best place in Canada for me right now is Toronto. And I didn't really know anything about Toronto before that. I think I visited twice before that, maybe three times, three times. I think once to visit family, another time on like a university, trip to kind of explore companies and whatnot. And then another time I just popped up right before I moved to visit a couple friends and take in the city. And in that trip, when I was there, probably about a month before I actually moved here, I realized how amazing this city is. It wasn't what I thought before. And I had a really good experience that I knew for sure that I wanted to live here. Didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew it was going to happen. And that brings me to a great point. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you know how you're going to get there. You just have to be so confident and sure of yourself that you know it's going to happen. You don't know the when, you don't know the how. You might not even know the why or where, but you just need to know it's going to happen. You have to be so convinced and confident in yourself that it doesn't matter what anyone else says. Here's where I'm going with this. So I was applying for jobs in Toronto while being on the East Coast for months. I did many interviews at a lot of the big companies like TJX. I was interviewing at like all the beer companies, et cetera, et cetera. And quite frankly, getting nowhere with them. And it's funny when I think back, I didn't really want the jobs anyways. Again, it goes back to when I was applying for roles during my co-ops. None of the jobs were really resonating with me at all. But it's funny when I think back, like a lot of people make city moves and make provincial moves and make any moves, and they base it on usually a job, whether they're going to school in another city or whether they're taking a job in another city. And that's what's sparking the move. But I couldn't wait. I really couldn't wait. I kept getting declined in these interviews. And I just said, you know what? I don't care. Like, how about I just go there and I'll figure it out myself? And that sounds a little cocky for sure. But where my head was at that time was, okay, I'm 23 years old. I have a full degree. I'm going to go to the city in Canada with literally the most jobs. I know people there already. I'm smart. I can figure it out. I've figured everything out up until this point. What's the worst that's going to happen? If I hate it, I'll just come back. Right? And so that's where my head was at. And when I get an idea in my head and when I'm convinced that something's going to happen and I want to get something done, nothing can get in my way. And I mean nothing. If you know anything about me, you know I love astrology and I'm a Taurus sun, if that means anything to you. But Tauruses are known as the bulls. So basically, move out of the way if I am trying to do something. And that is exactly how my soon to be move to Toronto ended up happening. So I remember to my mom in that early October, I said, you know what? I'm just going to go to Toronto. And she's like, where are you working? Where are you staying? You're still in a lease in your apartment. What are you doing with your current apartment? What are you doing with all your stuff? What are you doing with your car? And I said, my God, too many questions, too many roadblocks, too many questions. All of this is simple. It'll all get figured out. And that's how I tend to operate. So anyone listening, and if you're trying to like understand and get advice, sometimes it's truly just like blind confidence. Like it's silly, but sometimes you literally have to put your blinders on and stop listening to other people giving you roadblocks and reasons not to do things. Stop listening to it. Because I sure did. I wasn't listening to anyone. I wasn't listening to any logic. And quite frankly, nothing I was doing was logical. So here's what ended up happening. So, long story short, I kind of quit everything on a whim. If anyone doesn't know this story, this is going to be a funny story for you. I quit everything on a whim. I started with the big stuff. You would think the big stuff was go secure yourself a job. Anyways, I gave up. I was like, whatever, I'm going to figure it out when I get there. I'm not worrying about that anymore. It's stopping me from doing this and I don't care. So the next big thing I started doing was I started selling everything. I mean, I wasn't even in that apartment for a year. Maybe just a year. And I started selling everything. I was getting rid of the couch. I was getting rid of all my big furniture because I wasn't really going to bring anything with me. Then I sold my car. Then the next step was I started looking for an apartment. And back then I was searching like Facebook Marketplace and Kijiji and everything. And I mean, it's funny thinking back now. I wish I knew I could call a real estate agent because I could have just made that a lot easier for myself. But hey, I ended up taking the hard way. And so I ended up finding a roommate on Kijiji who I'm still friends with to this day, who is fantastic. And I'm so glad the universe brought us together. Ended up finding a roommate on Kijiji, did the whole FaceTime thing and just got comfortable and whatnot. Ended up signing for an apartment there. So I got that figured out. And so the next update when I call my mom, I'm like, okay, everything's pretty much sold. She thought I was 100% joking that I was moving to Toronto. But hey, when I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. And I continued to prove that. So I told her, yeah, well, I found a place. And of course, she's nervous. She's like, okay, you're moving to a random city, living with someone you don't know. You don't even know where you're living. You've never really been there. Like, oh my God, what are you doing? Anyways, I wasn't too worried. And so the next step was, as this episode says, was putting my notice in. So honestly, that was the hardest part for me because it's really hard to quit a job when nothing is really wrong. Like when the company has treated you so well, they're paying you well, but you just don't feel it. You don't feel like it's a right fit. I mean, it's the same with relationships, like leaving someone even though they didn't really do anything, but you know deep down this isn't it. And that's how I felt about that job and that career path. So that was really tough. I actually still to this day, that was probably the hardest job I've ever quit in my life. And so ended up putting my notice in and I said bye to everyone. I had a couple going away parties and I moved to Toronto. And that is when honestly the hard part started. So let me paint a picture for you. I mean, I was 22, 23 years old at the time. Like I wasn't making crazy money. I was making okay money for 22 years old, but not Toronto money. Let's just say that. During me planning all of this, I did not take into account how much more expensive Toronto as a city is. This is why I'm not like a consultant or anything anymore because I'm really bad at contingency plans, like really, really bad. I tend to just go with the flow and kind of feel it out and figure it out as I go. I would drive a super type A planning type person crazy. So anyways, I get to Toronto. I'm happy. Like I feel like nothing can stop me. I feel very confident. I feel very free. Like it was probably the best I've ever felt. And I always say this to a lot of people. Some of my favorite times in my life have been when I've quit or when I've been unemployed. And that's kind of a joke, but it's also kind of very true. I've been very happy after quitting jobs. And I think it's because you get this huge release, you know? So I ended up moving to Toronto without a job. And basically, I was doing a ton of just like random jobs. I I ended up starting to apply at restaurants with literally no restaurant experience. I don't know how or where I got the audacity to think I could do that job because that is a very hard job. And I quickly realized I could not do it and got fired pretty quickly. So I'm in Toronto, finally got a job, worked there for a week, and I kind of got fired. So yeah, that was a bit of a blow to the ego. When I think back, it's a bit of a funny story. Anyways, so I kept doing a random, like bunch of random odd jobs. I was doing courses. I was like doing a bunch of like brand ambassador work. Basically, think we're in November now of that year that I moved. And my thought process was, okay, let's start looking at my money situation. How long of a runway do I have before I literally run out of money and things aren't going to look too good? I had a couple months. That's it. I remember I think, well, I sold my car. So that gave me a couple grand. I had a couple grand in savings, I think. But when I think back, like I didn't really have that much money. And a super funny story that gives a sense of where my financial situation was at this time. I'm just getting out of university. So I have 30 grand in debt. Then I'm living in the most expensive city in Canada without a job and very, very little savings. Great. And what else am I doing? Oh, yeah, I'm living like a Toronto girly. I'm buying $10 juices. I'm going out for nice dinners. Yeah, I'm living like a little Toronto girly. I didn't live like a Toronto girly once I got a job. I smartened up after that. But definitely in the first couple months of living there, I was living a bit of the high life and just kind of enjoying my life. So that being said, I realized that, okay, honestly, it's the beginning of November, it's second week of November at this time. This is back in 2016. And I thought to myself, okay, honestly, I have a month to figure this out. 5, maybe 6 weeks, because in 5 weeks, I'm going home for Christmas anyways. And so I won't worry about this. So I have 5 weeks to figure this out. And if I don't, whatever, I'll go home for a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 10 days. I'll come back January 1st, first week of January. I'll start this process again. We'll figure it out. And I feel like I'm not like giving concrete advice, but I think you can figure out just from like the stories I'm telling you where my head's at and where the confidence and the courage is coming from. So I'm thinking, okay, I have to figure this out within 5 weeks or shit's going to get bad. I have this amount of money left as a runway before things are going to get really bad. And I knew at what point I would have to start putting serious pressure on myself. So as I was applying for jobs and sending a resume and doing interviews, and mind you, it was a lot easier to get interviews and apply for jobs and be taken seriously once I lived in Toronto. I had that Toronto address. I could show up in person for an interview. People took me a lot more seriously. And I knew that when I was on the East Coast applying for jobs, I knew no one would take me seriously unless I was here. And that was one of the bigger reasons why I wanted to move here, because I wanted to be part of bigger companies and bigger marketing companies that I knew if I wanted that, I would have to be in Toronto. And I was willing to take a short-term risk for a long-term gain. Yeah, I worked a bunch of odd jobs just to kind of be able to pay groceries and whatnot. And here's the thing, if you're kind of in between careers or you feel like you have that job that's steady and you maybe you might feel like other jobs like aren't really up to your caliber. I never ever thought that. I never ever looked at a job as below me or above me or anything like that. At that time, I knew whatever jobs I was doing was simply to have money for that week, that month, while I applied for quote unquote real job, when I was applying for like an office job. So I enjoyed those 6 to 8 weeks of just kind of doing like freelance work and doing a bunch of jobs just to make money. I enjoyed it. I had no shame in it at all, actually. I did end up getting a job, I believe, right before. No, it wasn't before Christmas. No, I went home for Christmas that year with still no job. And here's the funny part. And here's where some advice will come through. I went home that year and you're in the age at that time, and I'm sure you all have felt this before, when you're in kind of those early 20s times, when you go home for Christmas, everyone's always asking you, what are you up to? What job are you doing? Are you dating anyone? Basically, people want updates. They're trying to fit you into that social hierarchy of like who's doing well for their life. Anyways, well, at that time, I moved to Toronto. I didn't really have any money left. I also didn't have a job. So so you can imagine that I had a lot to say. Oh, right. And I also didn't have a boyfriend. God forbid. So I was looking real good that Christmas, but I was so happy. Isn't that funny? I didn't have this huge job to show off. I didn't have this gorgeous boyfriend to show off. And I was super happy. Funny how that works. Hey. Anyways, I believe I came back right after Christmas that year. I came back actually before New Year's. So I was here and I knew that. I was like, well, mom, like honestly, I gotta get back right away and start applying for jobs. I gotta go figure this out. I gotta grow up and figure this out. Within a week or so, I ended up getting my job at HelloFresh at the time. And I was there for almost 3 years. So I started like a week later. So when I think back, I moved to Toronto the end of October, kind of hung out for a bit and just enjoyed the city for a bit. And I had a full-time job by mid-January. It wasn't that long. And in between that, I went home for a bit. So again, it goes back to my advice that I gave earlier. I just knew it was going to happen. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, I didn't know anything. I just knew like there's no concept in my mind that I wouldn't have a full-time job living in Toronto. I just knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when and what and how. I let the universe figure all that out. And I did the work. I was applying for jobs. I was doing the interviews. I did all the stuff I needed to do. And then I just let what I couldn't control figure itself out. And ultimately, I had a job pretty quickly. That was a good story that I'm always really proud to share because the theme of that story is, again, releasing control, just having true conviction, knowing that success is around the corner for you, that you will figure it out. And ultimately, it's all going to be okay. It just might take a little bit of time and to not get stressed that, again, it will figure itself out. And I just knew that deep down. And I think that's what prevented me from ever getting stressed out about the situation or anxious. I just knew it was going to happen. It was just going to take some time. And I was willing to risk that. And the risk was worth it. So I ended up working at HelloFresh for almost 3 years and I absolutely loved my job. I mean, I didn't get paid very well, but everyone kind of knows that startup marketing scene of Toronto. You work all the time and you work a lot and you work really hard and you also work on really cool things. And ultimately, if you stay that path, then it really opens you up to a lot of great opportunities. I know my friends, some of the jobs they have now that my friends that I worked at HelloFresh with, some of the jobs they have now, it's because of their experience at HelloFresh that have opened those doors for them. So, I mean, if I stayed on that path, it would have opened a lot of doors and opened up a lot of different income opportunities for me. But hey, I changed careers, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, I loved my job. I worked on a lot of cool things. I did all the influencer, affiliate, and podcast marketing. So it opened me up to a lot of cool events. I did a lot of cool projects and campaigns, and I learned a ton, ton. And ultimately, I have nothing but good things to say about that experience. But for me, I'm an extremely ambitious person. And it's funny how long it took me to realize this, but I definitely have this true entrepreneurial, ambitious spirit that I wish I knew earlier on that I was definitely meant to work for myself. I just have a different hunger when I'm working for myself than when I am working for other people. So, towards the end of my time at HelloFresh, I started to get that like itch again where I was thinking, you know what? I don't really want to climb this ladder anymore. I don't even know what career path even interests me. And every time I would look at other jobs and again, other job descriptions, nothing was interesting me. And I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but I felt like something was wrong with me. I genuinely did. I thought to myself, there's no way that everyone else looks at these job descriptions and are so bored and uninspired, because that's exactly how I felt. I like nothing inspired me about them. I was almost kind of changing myself to fit this job description. And I never ever thought there was an option to create my own job description or create my own job. Because again, I don't come from an entrepreneurial background. I didn't know what it was like to run your own business at that time. But I did know that again, I had this feeling of unhappiness, and I didn't, not that I was depressed by any means at that point, but I didn't really know what I was working towards or why. And I just knew deep down that I had to change something. And ultimately that led me down the idea of doing my real estate license, which it's still crazy to me how long it took me to realize that. I genuinely wish I realized it sooner than later. But hey, it is what it is. Like divine timing is what I believe in. But what I ended up doing was, and think if you're in a position right now where you want to make a career change, but you don't really want to quit your job because I mean it's paying your bills, that's a fine. That's what I did. But you got to be willing to make some serious sacrifices in order to be able to make that change and still keep your steady income. So for me, I would work all day and then I would go home and study at night. No different if you're an accountant doing your CPA or doing your CFA or maybe going to grad school or thinking about studying for the GMAT. You have to be willing to make sacrifices. And mind you, studying for my real estate license is nowhere near doing your CPA or studying for the GMAT or the LSAT or anything like that. That's definitely a lot harder. Real estate license is a little bit easier, not as time consuming, but I still had to make sacrifices. I couldn't go out for drinks and go hang out with friends and just kind of do like fun things in the evenings. For those 6 to 8 months, I had to study. And then on weekends, I was studying, and weekends I was taking exams. Like you had to be really diligent. When I was studying for these exams and studying to get this licensing while on top of doing my full-time job, it's not like you can just do 1 week of studying altogether. No, you have to do 2 hours a night every single night. And when you're doing that in the summer, I know a lot of people are doing their CPA and studying for GMATs and LSATs in the summer times. It's tough. And especially after a long day of work, you are exhausted. And you wake up all the time and you wonder, you sit there all the time, like, what is this even for? But you have to remind yourself that you want to make a career change. Whatever you're doing right now, you're not happy with. So in order to get to the change that you believe at this time is going to make you happier or maybe make you more money or maybe open more doors for you, you got to be willing to make sacrifices and deal with the pain and the exhaustion of doing it all to be able to make that change. Now, you could be in a fortunate position of just quitting your job and maybe just chilling for a bit, maybe go traveling. Like if you're fortunate to be in that position, all power to you. I said at the beginning of this episode, when I first moved to Toronto, I quit a job with no job. And it's because I was 23, young and dumb. Like I didn't have any responsibilities. I wasn't saving any money, so I didn't know the power of saving money. I was just 23 years old. But then now think like, look how much I've grown 3-4 years later after that, when I'm quitting another job to be able to make a career change. I'm doing it a little bit more strategically because I have an apartment to pay for. If I do this licensing exam, I have to pay for these courses. Like no one else is paying it for me. Notice how as I had more on my plate, more responsibilities, my risk aversion has gone down a little bit. Mind you, my risk aversion is still pretty high, higher than the average person, I would say. But yeah, you can see that as I progress, then I wanted to take more calculated risk. Funny, hey? I guess I grew up a little bit there. But anyways, I just want to point out a few more tips and advice of when I was making those changes. I didn't know at that time if real estate was going to make me happy. I mean, there's some days it really doesn't. It can be pretty stressful, but I knew I had to make a change. And again, at that time, I thought to myself, it's going to be this or something else. I won't know if it's this or not if I don't make the change. And I find when I talk to other people, a lot of people say the reason why they're not quitting their jobs or changing their careers is they don't know if the next thing is going to be better. Yeah, none of us know. But isn't it worse
not knowing. I would rather figure it out now instead of always be wondering what if, you know? So imagine the time is going to pass regardless. So if you're sitting here today thinking of this amazing idea, or maybe you're sitting in a 9 to 5, or maybe sitting in an office job and you're just bored out of your mind and you're thinking, you know what? I would love to go back to school. I would love to do social work. I would love to be a photographer. I would love to honestly teach myself digital marketing and maybe just like be a digital marketer. Okay, do it. What's stopping you? It's simple when I say it like that. Hey, but honestly, ask yourself right now, what is stopping you? I always say to people when they're debating whether they're going to make a change in their life in terms of career or anything, really, I always say the time is going to pass regardless. So you either do it or you don't. And there's nothing worse than having this conversation again 2 years from now and being like, shit, well, it's 2 more years gone past and I still haven't done anything about it. And think if you started it 2 years ago, you'd be in that new job, you'd be in that new role, you'd have that new salary, you'd be on that new career path. You know, that, like I said, the time is going to pass regardless. And some people always worry like, oh, well, maybe I don't have the skill set to make that change. Maybe there's a lot more schooling that I need to do. Maybe I don't have the money. My advice is the same. The time is going to go regardless. You can sit here and a year later still be unqualified to do that, or you can start the work today, teach it to yourself. Anything that you want to learn, you can go figure it out and teach it to yourself and be able to make those changes. So think to yourself today, am I happy? Loaded question, hey? But when you get a moment to yourself, when you sit down and really think, what does my soul desire? What does my day-to-day look like? What does my dream life look like? And when I say dream life, your dream life might be the job you're doing right now, and that's amazing. Your dream life might be the city that you're living in, and that's amazing. But if it's not, then what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Because I know anytime in my life, if I've ever thought that, don't know about this, not feeling aligned on this, this is not making my heart sing as much as I would want, I've always had the courage to get up and change things because I couldn't risk another day feeling the way I did at the time. And I knew how good that feeling would be when I would feel in alignment, when I would feel like the job I was doing or the career path I was on was lighting me up. I knew that getting to that feeling was worth any pain along the journey to get there, any exhaustion, any risk of people saying no or risk of people rejecting me. I knew that I was willing to take all of those risks and go through all those potential failures and mistakes to be able to get to that moment of feeling, yeah, I can wake up today and know I enjoy what I do. And growing up, I thought that was not an option for a lot of people. I thought that waking up every single day and loving what you do and loving where you live and loving all the aspects of your life, I thought that was a pipe dream growing up. I always did. And I thought only a select few people would get that in a lifetime. And it's taken me years and years and years to unpeel each layer of that onion, of that conditioning that has happened. And sometimes when I talk to friends and family members, they think I'm crazy. They honestly think I'm crazy. I'll say things like, yep, well, I'm going to live here soon. Or, yep, that's the next deal that I'm going to close. Or I'm traveling here next year. Or that's the type of home I want to live in. And they're like, okay, sure, whatever you say. But I know as long as I can conceptualize the idea in my head, then I know it's possible. It's just a matter of putting in the work, getting into alignment, and feeling the feelings of already having it, that it's going to lead me to the path of getting there. And I am a firm believer that if you start getting all of those mindset shifts in order, I think you'd be shocked at what you can accomplish and what you can change in your life for the better. So I want to start concluding this episode because there's still some stories and parts of even this topic that I want to save for other episodes, but I want to leave you with this thought. So right now in my career, I'm a real estate agent in Toronto full time. I run this podcast on the side, and I can genuinely say that I'm extremely happy. I wake up every single day and I realize even every time I like roll over and I wake up, I'm like, I can make this day into whatever I want. And that's a really powerful and fun and privileged position to be in some days. But I worked towards that to be able to have that freedom. And I mean, I'm still building that freedom. There's definitely levels of freedom that I still want and I'm still aspiring to that I will get to. It's just a matter of time and hard work. But just know that, yes, I'm extremely happy with everything I've been building and everything I do today. But I might wake up 3 years from now and say, you know what? This isn't it anymore. I'm not feeling it anymore. This doesn't light my soul up anymore. And I have the tools in my toolkit and the experiences and the proof points to be able to say, you know what? I can change this. I can go define another career path. I can go pivot again. I can make the changes because, as you can see, I've already done it. So you need to start today. If there's a change that you want to make in your life, if you want to quit your job, please just start listening to podcasts like these or start watching YouTube videos of people going through these experiences so that you can get the confidence to see that someone else out there has done this. If you want to make that change today, once you make that simple change, you will be shocked and surprised and so proud of yourself that once you make that one little change, you will have the confidence to be able to make bigger changes in your life. And it will be such a positive domino effect that you will be able to have more risk aversion and be willing to take bigger risk and be able to make changes that ultimately lead to a happier life for you. So stop getting caught up in the roadblocks that you are inevitably putting in front of yourself. The biggest thing you always need to start with is check your mindset. Check what you believe about yourself and check those limiting beliefs. If you don't feel like you're qualified enough or you feel like, the job that you have is safe now and it's fine. Do you want to live a life of fine? No, that's not the way you want to live your life. If you're worried about debt and you can't take on any more, I get that. I mean, I've quit jobs without money. I've quit jobs while I was in a bunch of student loan debt, but get clear on what you really want in life and get clear on, can you handle a little bit more risk? Is this a risk that you can take that ultimately it will lead to bigger gains soon? You know your risk tolerance. So start thinking about that. Start going over that with yourself because you can get more money, but you can't get any time back. So it's not worth not being happy or feeling in alignment in terms of your career. It's not worth feeling that way one more day. So I hope today's stories of my experiences have inspired you to, if not make a change today, at least start thinking about those changes and thinking about whether or not what you do every single day and how you spend every hour of your day, is it lighting you up? And if it's not, you need to start asking yourself those serious, tough questions. Get deep down and start figuring out what it is you truly want to do because there's natural gifts innately in you that you are not sharing with the world. Yeah, let that one sink in. You have skills that you are not utilizing that the world is waiting to see, dying to see. And if you are not in the career path that you truly feel aligned to be on, then you're actually not sharing your gifts with the world. So realistically, it's you're the one that's being selfish. And I say that with a lot of compassion because I'm in a career that I feel aligned with now. And I feel like my natural skill level is coming out and it shines a lot. And it makes me really happy. And I want you and everyone else to feel the same way. I'm not trying to sound like a preacher because, like I said, I might wake up a year, 2, 3 years from now and say, you know what, this isn't it. Let's pivot again. And I just want you to know that you have the power to make those pivots and changes in your life every single day. The only thing you need to figure out is how quickly are you going to start? Are you going to start today, or are you going to wait another year before you make those changes? I recommend figuring it out today and not wasting a second more. With that being said, let's conclude it here. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you are looking for a little bit more encouragement in terms of quitting that job or leaving anything in your life, if you want a pep talk or a little encouragement, please reach out, because I will absolutely help you get there. And if you want to even bounce some ideas off in terms of, do you think this is a good idea to make this change? I mean, I can't answer that for you, but I can at least be a listening ear. So feel free to come into my DMs and ask me those questions. And if you're watching this on YouTube, just leave a comment in the comment section below. Anyways, that's it. That's the episode. Thank you so much for being here. And I can't wait to see you here again next week. Bye. Did you know that I'm not only a podcast host, but in my full-time career, I am a Toronto-based real estate agent. In 2021, I closed 100 deals. Yes, you heard that correctly, 100. So if you or someone you know is a busy professional looking to get into the Toronto real estate market and looking to work with a realtor who values your time, make sure to reach out to me and let's get connected. And in the meantime, we'll see you here back next week.